Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Josh Thiel. I have kind of a strange background, so I'm from West Lafayette, Indiana, right here, home-born Hoosier, or in this case, you might say Boilermaker for me. Just a quick drive down. So I left and went to West Point a long time ago. I was going to stay in 5 years, get out, make a ton of money, and then the war kicked off, and I had a particular set of skills that were decent. And 21 years later, I found myself still in, and then finally moved back home to Indiana. So I moved back in there, and conveniently for me, just through a network of just great people and servants in the state, I ran into David. So David Duggan, kind of one of the key producers of the conference here. If you haven't met him, he's done a lot of work behind the scenes, also has a lot of FBI interesting backgrounds. And if you haven't spoken with him, you definitely should. So kind of through my tours and where I ended up and kind of how I found myself here today is I was a special forces guy. I was actually trained for Asia, so lots of work dealing with China, whether I'm on mission and they're cyber attacking you, or whether it's at our home base they're trying to penetrate, or different things we did here in the continental United States in support of other agencies. Specifically, like someone was talking earlier, I think it was Dave, the National Guard rep for Muscatatuck. I've trained there a bunch of times. Related to cyber, I've actually taken a bunch of Asian special operations units and trained them in Muscatatuck. We were looking for a place kind of off-grid that we could train them. So Chinese hackers, cyber, espionage weren't watching us, and I was like, hey, I got this great little place in my home state of Indiana. So we went down to Muscatatuck. So I've trained there a bunch of times, right? So if you ever get a chance to go down and check it out, they do tours. It's actually a FEMA-owned facility. That's all those houses and all the demolitions, construction. They train a lot of people there every single year. So if you ever get a chance to go for a tour or check it out, you should. And then the digital cyber environment they're adding there is just going to make it even better, fantastic. I'm really excited about the social media aspect of that as well. Toured all over the U.S. or all over the world for my time in the military. So operations in Thailand, some counter-narco-terrorism, Chinese black market arms trade, Papua New Guinea, J3, which is like a director of operations for counterterrorism Southern Philippines, a bunch of deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, just like everybody else, Korea, all over the place, right? So it was just a great journey, serving with great people, really talented all over, both U.S., but then also the other governments, right? So pairing the diversity with the local inhabitants, always consult the locals, like, where do I go for the best brewery in town, right? Always consult the locals. Where's the best food? Don't eat that, don't eat this, right? And then all the other aspects of their national security culture and things you need to consider. So for everyone in the room, one, thanks so much for having me here today. I think we've got some students, some faculty, we've got some other presenters around. Thanks for coming today. And you know, they probably could have turned this into a holiday being Veterans Day, so it's pretty amazing they did this today. Kind of shows Anderson's commitment to one, cybersecurity, and two, national security, that they decided to do this today. And you all have other things you could have done with your time, so I would say cybersecurity is the biggest national security challenge we're facing, so thanks so much for taking your day, allocating your time to pursue and learn more about this really, really important topic. Kind of as we go through, there's a bunch of, the last thing I'll say here before we get into it is, whether it's a veteran or whether it's all these FBI agents who are around here, David has a great network, right? Before national security, you think soldiers, veterans, right? They fought on the front lines, they went to other countries. With the internet world and with globalization, everything got flatter, right? And a lot of those battles have come to our own shores. And that is cyber, right? That is what's happening right now, and the FBI is on the forefront of that too. So service and veterans aren't really just people in uniform anymore. They're also the people standing on those front lines, the digital front lines every day for a bunch of the FBI agents that you're seeing here today. So if you get a chance, thank them for their service too on Veterans Day. So I'm gonna put up a graphic, and I want you guys to just raise your hand if you think you know where it is, and I'm gonna call on a few of you. Does anybody know where this is? Okay. What do you got? Japan, okay. Did anybody not guess Japan? What was the first thing that came?
Australia.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody guess something other than Japan? Okay, so it is Japan. What's different about the picture? Why does the picture look funny?
It's not north-south.
It's not north-south. Anybody else? No labels, oriented on the access. You're right. So why did I throw this picture up here, right? I put this picture up here because it's something for us to think about perspective. So I got a lot of answers, right? David actually said Horn of Africa. I've heard Cuba. I've heard Indonesia, right? But it actually is Japan rotated on the axis. So how did I find this picture? Why did I put this up here? I actually ran across this picture for the first time. I was a 4-stars aide. He was in charge of everyone in the Pacific, right, for the Army. And I was always moving around with them. And I was with him for 2 years, right? I was supposed to be with him 1 year, but he didn't have any kids. And I don't know, he kind of adopted me as his kid. So I'm always with him. Well, those full 2 years, the chief of staff of the Army of Japan, a guy named General Wada, was also there. So we got to know him pretty well too. And we were in and out of his office all the time. And by the time the third visit, this was on his wall right when we came in. Okay. And finally, I just couldn't control myself. Aides really aren't supposed to talk a lot. But I said, sir, I've got to ask, what's this picture? And he says, this is how Japan feels. I'm looking at a picture. Japanese aren't really known for their emotion either, so this is how Japan feels. Really weird, right? But if you know anything about Asian culture and Japanese culture, but really all people, we're usually all trying to communicate what we're thinking or feeling. Why did you dress a certain way? What car do you drive? House? What things do you like to do? What are your hobbies? People are trying to communicate with you all the time. And in Asia, specifically Japan, in an office, they will change out that whole office for every single visitor because they are trying to communicate with you subtly. So for this, he was trying to communicate how Japan feels. What do you think he was trying to tell me about how Japan feels? Happy? Okay. Anybody else?
On its side.
On its side. Okay. Anybody else? Come on, somebody in the back row. It feels kind of on its side, right? But more so, it's a question. We feel alone, is what he was trying to tell us. And as he described it to us, you've got the deep trench in the Pacific Ocean and that deep blue behind it. What's behind me? What should be down here, way down here? The U.S., an ally, right? We're not in the picture. That's the question. And as he described it, what's above? China, North Korea, Russia, right? The 3 most aggressive countries in the region and probably on the planet. Maybe throwing in Iran too, but he's not on the picture, so those 3. He's like, we have the weight of the world of China, Russia, right? North Korea, on our backs. And we have this deep abyss that we may fall into. And our question is the United States going to be there? He was trying to tell us how he feels, right? And it's a kind of an important lesson in perspectives, right? That's why I put it up there. So you're probably asking that, right? We're here to talk about cybersecurity. Why did I put up this picture? And why am I talking to you about Japan, telling stories about Japan and talking about perspectives? Well, I'm here to kind of impress upon you today that perspectives are one of the most important things in life, all dynamics, but it's also just as important for cybersecurity professionals, specifically when you go into a business someday or when you're working with other businesses, right? So why do you think perspectives are important for a cybersecurity professional?
Some people don't understand the business, and the business means if you're not making profit, you cease to be a business.
Okay.
It's not about just helping users with IT.
Okay. Who else? Anybody else?
Knowing how other people view and think will help you communicate maybe important information in their language so they can understand what's going on.
Okay. You're all right, but you're all wrong. The answer here is a medical term that I've made up. It's called junior high syndrome. Does anybody know what junior high syndrome is? Junior high syndrome is when you're in junior high, you think that everybody is looking at you, right? You spill something in your shirt, everybody saw you. Oh, I tripped over that crack. Everyone saw me, everyone's making fun of me, right? It's junior high syndrome. You think that the world is looking at you, but they're not, because everyone else is also just looking at themselves and worried about themselves and think that everyone's looking at them, right? Junior high syndrome, unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you, it lasts beyond junior high, right? It goes all the way up and lasts your entire life. It's gonna haunt you forever. And as a cybersecurity professional, you know all the risks to cybersecurity, and you're thinking everybody knows this, everybody cares, everybody wants to know this. But I hate to break this to you, They don't care. They're just looking at themselves, right? So HR, what are they worried about? They're worried about recruiting. They're worried about the benefits. They're worried about this, right? Logistics is worried about getting the stuff there on time. Operations is worried about the metrics and the service to the customers, right? They, unfortunately, I'm sorry, are not worried about cybersecurity. In fact, take it one step further, they probably think that you are impairing their jobs and making life harder for them, right? HR is like, man, I've got to include this in my onboarding training. Finance is on me to shorten my onboarding because we're paying people, right? Costs us money. Operations is like, man, we had a security violation, so you shut down my systems. I'm trying to support the customers. Logistics is like, hey, I really want to open up our data to my upstream and downstream logistics so I can find some efficiencies, right? And all you do is tell me no, 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 and put up all these firewalls, right? And so to them, you're a hindrance, right? This is their perspective, right? So we're back to perspectives. So as a cybersecurity professional, your job is going to be a little bit more than just putting up the monitoring, the firewalls, the systems, the programs, selecting and hiring the third party, right? It's going to be to change perspectives in your organization, or if you're in a firm that is cybersecurity, it's to change or market those perspectives and the importance of it to other companies that you're trying to sell. Okay. So, it's an interesting thing. Like when we talk about the perspective and changing that perspective, I experienced this with my kids, right? So last week, stranger comes to the front door. What do? They go right to the front door. They're very polite kids. They open the door and they let this perfect stranger right into the house. And I'm like, come on, guys. I was talking with my 9-year-old on Wednesday, and he's like, well, Dad, if he was a bad guy, I just brought him in the house so you can trap him and then you can beat him up until the police come, right? And I had another strange encounter with my 5-year-old who said that if a bad guy got in the house that I would just kick him in a word, right, that she wasn't supposed to use, and everything would be just fine because he would run away and leave, right? So this is no different, right? We can do all these things. I can put the cameras up in the house. I can put locks on the doors, but when my kids let them in, defeats all the security. It's the same thing for you, right? Cybersecurity professional, just like Alex before me said, the humans are the weakest piece in the link, right? You can put in all the monitoring, all the scanning, all the things, right? All the programs, hire the third party, all the things. But if your employees or the people in the company are opening the digital front door to the enemy or the opposition, you're hosed. None of that stuff matters, right? So your employees, I don't want to call them kids, but don't let them open the front door. So to do that, though, I had to talk to the kids and change their perspective. Well, hey, guys, what if there's a few of them? What if they're armed? What if this? What if that? I got to change their perspective on the environment, and that is going to be the biggest challenge for you as a cybersecurity professional, because ultimately you can do all the things. You're going to need the whole team to buy in. Okay? So most of the companies, what happens when you go into a company? What do you do for cybersecurity? What are the things that happen for an average employee? Anybody know?
In what role?
It just a regular company, cybersecurity. The employees, what do they get?
Hopefully, cyber awareness training.
Cyber awareness training, right? So they're going to get that cyber awareness training, maybe, right? Some companies don't. Maybe they get the cyber awareness training, but in the end, it kind of becomes a check the blocks, right? If you don't tie it to their daily operations and the risk, if you don't make it part of the test, if you don't tie it to performance evals, if you don't integrate it with other things, they're never going to buy in, and they're probably going to inadvertently open the front door, or they're going to open that front door because they need to do it for their division or to accomplish their logistics goal, their HR goal, or their operational goal, right? So you've got to change these perspectives. And frankly, for my entire career, I thought about this, I kind of knew this, but I never really did anything. Well, that changed 2018. I came back from Afghanistan, big old deployment, and I was getting ready to take a break for a year, and they said, no, we got one more little thing for you. We want you to go take command of these 2 training centers, right? And the special operations portion of the training center at the National Training Center in California and the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisiana, right? These are huge, huge areas that we set aside back in the World War II time period, so we could do large exercises. And you probably don't know this, but once a month, 12 times a year, both locations, 5,000 soldiers tee off against about 3,000 soldiers in this mock battle. And it is as real as it can get, right? The tanks are moving. Unfortunately, there's a statistical average for number of deaths per rotation because dangerous stuff happens, right? It's completely pay to play. What's that mean? That means if you don't order the food doesn't come and you're hungry. That means if the aviation maintenance isn't done, then you're walking 20 miles instead of flying, right? It is a complete, real, live battlefield environment, right? So my charter, they put me in charge of the soft side, and they said, hey, Army Special Operations is not using a lot of cyber, right? Not enough. We want more. Take us more to the future, right? So my charter was to catch us up, start thinking about China, to set us up so we can use cyber to penetrate denied areas, right? And then the last thing is to defend or integrate cyber into all of our operations. So while I kind of knew it was a problem, we didn't integrate it well before, now it was thrust upon me. My job was to find it and make it a part of everything we did, right? And that's going to be, as a cybersecurity professional and cyber professional for you, that's going to be your challenge someday too. How do I integrate and tie this into everything else? Because you've got to, otherwise there will be gaps and the doors will be open, right? So I looked at what we had, right? We had this great course at Fort Bragg where we would send the soldiers occasionally. They would train. They got some defense training. They got some offense training. Then they go back to their unit and the skills would atrophy, right? Because everybody forgets. That's why cyber awareness training is usually done once a year, because everybody's going to forget or not use it. But ultimately everyone forgot and no one really cared, right? So as we looked at this, it was just whitewashed, completely whitewashed. And when I thought about this, I was like, okay, you got to do a few things. You got to give training, but then you've got to communicate a standard, and you got to communicate expectations, right? So what I did is I called all the commanders and said, hey, there are these courses there. A fraction of your soldiers go. You need 2 of them, 2 trained people per 12 people, or you will fail this coming year when you bring your unit through. So the training was in place. We had to set the standard. The next thing was to communicate the standard to those commanders. You say, hey, you will fail. And guess what? This is part of your report card. The wars are done, so report cards are going back to the training centers. You will fail if you do not do this. And it took a rotation or 2, and some people failing pretty bad, and then they told all their peers that I wasn't kidding. And when they came through, we were in a much better place, right? And so as we did this, I communicated that standard. Then the third thing, though, wasn't on them. It was completely on me, right? I had to create the test. I had to create the environment. I had to set up the scenarios, and I had to show them how once you put cyber into the activities that you were going to be stronger and you were going to be more effective specifically against the future threats. So most companies are still operating 10, 20 years ago. They don't even realize the threats are out there, small companies, right? But they're out there. So you got to make them aware and put them in a scenario that they can actually utilize the systems and utilize the skills, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little video on what we made, and it's just to really inspire you a little bit about someday when you're the professional, what are you going to do? How are you going to communicate the standards? How are you going to make an environment? How are you going to show the people in the other divisions that you work with that cyber is actually important? They've got to integrate it. So it's going to be rah-rah movie time here for a second. If I can get out of this. Okay. You guys hear that up there? Uh-oh. If we're going to have a malfunction, it's just on my computer. Hold on. Is that coming out up there yet?
Since the 1993 Gulf War,
uh-oh,
adversary states
we got a malfunction here. Give me 1 second.
Our weaknesses. While we respond to the 9/11.
Don't worry, all of the students in here have seen me mess up audio video presentations on a daily basis.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel
Very good company.
better, maybe.
If you want to hold off, I'll go get you a speaker. I used it in mine.
Oh, yeah.
Bluetooth.
If you could, yeah. That'd be great.
They will harass you about it, though. They harass me about it. You know.
I know, it's going to come up in my evals. We know the noise is a standard, so I'm going to fail at the test. So while he's grabbing the speaker, Any questions so far?
When were you at NTC?
When was I at NTC? I was there from 2019 to 2020. And so I would spend a week at NTC, then I would fly back to JRTC and go back and forth for a week. So,
Yeah, we did an op in 2001.
okay,
A great big brigade. We did red team.
okay.
We lost.
Yeah, they always lose. Denovia is always going to win. So, see if he grabs that. What else? Any other questions? What year are you guys? Is everybody kind of 1 year or different years? Junior? Junior. What were you guys hoping to get out of today? Just in general, not this particular presentation.
I would just, yeah, I'm not too knowledgeable in cyber security and just anything general with it, because I'm more on the national security side.
Okay.
And so just it's been insightful just learning more about threats and how national security is being shaped by the cyber threats.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would kind of just agree with that a lot. I'm more focused on the national security side, but it's really interesting to hear about how much like the two coincide.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I guess up until this point, they've kind of seemed a little separate,
Mhm.
almost like domestic, like law enforcement versus like international, like the CIA, what the CIA does.
Yeah.
But hearing about how like the two really do work hand in hand more than we think has been very enlightening, I guess.
Yeah. So there's a few good books out there, right? So Click Here to Kill Everyone. Also Zero Day. And those two books and a bunch of other stuff, it kind of ties into some of the questions that in Alex's chat right before this. And it's how much governments are using, specifically Russia, are experts in the cyber attack arena, right? So the question was back to every single offensive action or aggressive action that Russia's done over the last, since 2007, has always involved disruption of power plants to either throw the country off balance, get them focused on something else, actually disrupt and influence so they don't have to invade, go to war, or as punishment for other things, right? So it's very, very easy to find. It's all over on Wikipedia, everywhere else, always in the books, right? But a lot of the things you got to realize is the infrastructure that we have in place before, the methods are changing, right? As we looked at this and we talked about Russia doing it. So before, you had very closed loop systems and you had to sneak code into those systems, and those codes could be sleeper codes, that could be activated codes. You would have to have an agent go in and activate. And if that happened, there's risk with that. Now, we've kept those separate for national security purposes, and a lot of the other countries have old systems like that are very closed. But to achieve the efficiencies, data efficiencies for your power plant, they're starting to go online. They're starting to make interfaces more like you'd see on the web. And when they do that and tie into the web for the big data advantages and efficiency advantages, it's exposing them to the cyber attack as well. And so that's what Russia's doing when they're influencing, so they can really avoid attack or get what they want politically without ever having to invade, right?
You just gotta go on your Bluetooth.
Sure.
Yeah. Microphones. Up. And up.
There we go. Right there? Maybe?
Somewhere you gotta connect it.
Okay.
I do search Bluetooth and then I'm not sure.
Okay.
You're not connected yet, so.
I don't know if this is going to work. All right. I'm going to spin this computer around and we're going to let it play
They invested
because we're in a
the
small
future.
room.
As the world ushered in the internet technology era, adversaries saw opportunities for revolutions in military affairs. Selective investments in new technology allows enemies to establish, overmatch, and effectively lock the U.S. out of key zones throughout the globe in places like South China Sea, along China's One Belt, One Road, and at continental crossroads such as the Ukraine. The localized domination is called Anti-Access Area Denial, or A2AD. A2AD zones have integrated air defense systems, jamming, cyber, and spoofing capabilities layered to render U.S. missiles and aircraft ineffective. The environment is integrated, and so special operations and U.S. Army maneuver forces must integrate our unique capabilities to a higher degree. We must evolve our doctrine, technology, our understanding of the combined arms team, and the way we view operational environment to confront peer capabilities. USASOC is committed to ensure Army Special Operations and Army Maneuver Forces come together at the combined training centers as we evolve multi-domain operations and build readiness to defeat A2AD zones. In large-scale combat operations dominated by A2AD zones, tens of thousands of troops, cyber attacks, it is tough to visualize RSOF's role. Common visualization of the A2AD battlefield might be found in an American movie classic, Return of the Jedi. Conventional forces can't get past the shield, and RSOF is paired with the indigenous force of Ewoks to drop the shield at a key time. It's all there. With a clear visualization, MDO doctrine as a guide, and research on our adversaries' A2AD capabilities and doctrine, USASOC SOT-D and NTC have built the NTC Superbox. The NTC Superbox is a 300-kilometer training corridor that spans from the north end of China Lake through Fort Irwin down to the Marine Corps Logistic Base rail yard. The Superbox size better replicates the ranges at which RSOF will operate, specifically through the operational deep fires area in MDO doctrine. More important than size alone, the Marine Corps Logistic Base provides a cyber target, sabotage target, and opportunity for tactical deception, while China Lake provides real radar capabilities to exercise 1/60th SOAR's tactics and capabilities. The Superbox has allowed us to create the following training scenario. In the scenario, intelligence indicates that the aggressor nation of the Novia has forward deployed ground units and IADs through the strategic rail yard close to the border. To deter the Denovian invasion, RSOF is tasked to degrade multiple enemy IADs simultaneously to enable joint disintegration of enemy systems. The operation begins with 2 ODGs conducting Halo infiltration into the operational area. ODG-1 links up with surrogate forces with cross-border access to begin human operations to find IADs. ODG-2 infiltrates to the strategic rail yard to link up with an ethnically marginalized rail yard worker. After proofing the safe house and partisan support, ODG-2 utilizes the rail yard worker to confirm the existence of a server, a soft logistics cyber target. With the soft cyber target confirmed, the ODG requests a 915th Cyber Team, SOT-A, and ODA from the Special Operations Task Force. The forces converge on the rail yard and conduct cyber ISR with options to slave Wi-Fi cameras, hardline cameras, Wi-Fi routers, and determine security force patterns of life and composition. Concurrent with the ODG operations, the SOTF continues to build capability and posture forces. The ODA conducts a long-range desert movement to the hide side, establishes HF communications twice a day, and awaits final target locations. Aviation assets begin charting an infiltration corridor. 1 Ranger company and 1 ODA begin mission preparation. The cyber target portion of the training is intended to inform interoperability between RSOF and Army cyber units, as well as train RSOF leaders in tactical deception. Any RSOF operation in a denied area in LSCO will leave a signature. Consequently, enemy forces would continue to search the facility and eventually uncover the cyber nature of the mission. Through enroll coaching, RSOF are mentored into the tactical deception opportunity. The ODA and surrogates conduct sabotage operations in the rail yard to deceive the enemy. Concurrently, the ODG and 915th Cyber Team gain entry to the service stack and establish an uplink to the 782nd MI Cyber. During the operation, enemy reinforcements will counterattack, presenting RSOF with tough decisions between tactical risks to surrogates and strategic objectives. The Sword of Intelligence and 782nd MI Cyber then have 24 hours to exploit the terabyte of server information. The final target information is passed to the ODA in the denied area, aviation units, rangers, and the additional ODA. The SOTF staff coordinates 3 raids with the joint team and Army long-range artillery to maximize disintegration of the enemy IADs. With the JTF synchronizing overarching multi-domain operations, the SOTF commands and controls the execution of RSOF operations in the denied area. An MQ-1, 160th SOAR, and one MC-130 infiltrate the denied areas at low flight levels. The MQ-1 and M-130 continue past tactical air defense lines to establish a forward arming and refueling point, while 160th SOAR inserts Rangers and Special Forces to destroy 2 integrated air defense system targets. Concurrently, the mounted ODA hiding in the denied area conducts a raid to destroy a 3rd IADS node. All forces report battle damage assessments to enable final adjustments to the Joint and Army penetration corridor. With the MQ-1 in overwatch, 160th SOAR completes refueling and exfiltrates the denied area, while Special Forces and Rangers then begin ground exfiltration to friendly lines. With the joint team disintegrating the enemy A2AD zone, the Army is able to maneuver and seize operational objectives.
Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on there, okay? And there's a lot of terms probably people didn't understand, okay? Let's try to tie it together with some of the other stuff we heard today from different lectures, okay? So essentially what we were doing is this, right? Let's think about, what were we talking about earlier? We were talking about China buying up croplands next to the power plant, putting up cell towers so they can monitor all of the traffic and figure out patterns of life and where people were going in penetration, right? Let's think about that. So you saw those bubbles, see this? Kind of weak. Those bubbles of control that you saw on the screen up there, right? Those bubbles of control mean that I can lock out the communications, I can protect, I can cyber defend this bubble, right? So these bubbles though, you want to expand them and move them if you want to control space. It's not unlike putting up those cell towers, collecting that information to expand your footprint and basically make your own bubbles. In this case, they're using our own laws, our openness to multinational corporations, the fact you can buy and sell stuff here to actually set up little bubbles all over the country, right? So essentially in that video, what you saw is it is almost exactly what ended up happening in Ukraine when we did it and we made the training environment for it 2 years prior, right? So if this is Ukraine, that was Russia, they basically took over and they extended that bubble out just like that. Well, what was back there is a rail yard, right? If you want to move armies and you want to control stuff, you'd use it by boat and train. You don't fly around tanks and stuff like that, right? Lots of equipment, you got to control them. So in that thing, you had the rail yard, right? So that rail yard, not unlike all the other things we heard about today. What did we talk about? Law firms. Why law firms? Why are they cyber attacking law firms?
Because they hold a lot of data and they have a lot of information on the companies.
Right.
Like they know more about the companies than the companies know about the companies.
Exactly, right? They're troves of information and data, right? That's exactly what we were doing, right? As the country invaded and controlled and took that rail yard, that's what we were after. It was a soft cyber target. So what we actually hid on that server was we hid in the resupply part shipments to those IADs. IADs are the air defense systems that we were trying to buck down that keep out our airplanes, right? So to chart and find those targets way back here, we actually used their soft target that they controlled against them, right? That's what we were after. So there's 2 pieces of this from a cyber perspective. One is a very tactical piece. So when that team goes in, the first thing they started doing is they start slaving all the cameras, right? Hacking into the cameras so they can use the cameras to actually watch, right? So if you're a cybersecurity person, you've got to, how do you monitor that? How do you know when someone else is using your cameras and watching your cameras against you? How do you know when someone else has actually put up an emitter on your base so they can watch everyone's cell phones and how they move around, so they know how the security force moves around? So on a tactical level, the teams are doing that. Well, guess what? Everybody's doing that now too. Everybody's watching, everybody's collecting data from every single device. It's not a secret, it's happening. A lot of times it's happening by companies because they're trying to sell you stuff, right? But other companies will do it so they can penetrate. Criminals will do it so they can actually attack and take stuff, steal stuff from systems. There's a lot of criminals out there that are way more high tech just so they can steal now, right? And they've got different components of a little organized crime network. So in that, we were after those parts. Now our teams, they've got those training courses we talked about, right? That's like your cybersecurity awareness course, pretty basic level, not your level, right? So they could do some of these things, but there's no way they can do what you do. That's exactly like why we partnered with the new Army cyber units, right? And this, essentially what we did, the teams went in and they slurped and took everything off that server and they shipped it out to that big unit. Now, what is that like for you guys, right? Let's say that you're working or you get hired for your first job for a 50-person company. Probably not a huge budget for active monitoring, all these things. So a lot of companies, what do? They hire a bigger firm that's an expert in it to do active monitoring of their system. That's essentially what we were doing. It's a third-party outsource is what I was doing. Just happened to be an Army unit. So inside the Army, outside of our tactical teams that are forward. So we slurped up all the information, sent it back there to the guys that are the big experts that are doing all the monitoring for us, right? I had the one person on my team, just like you may be the only cybersecurity professional in your company, right? My guys knew who to ask and how to coordinate. They spoke the same language, so they could do that. Slurped it out, and then they found where those parts were going, right? Then they told our teams, and we launched everybody in, took out the IADs, and then the Star Wars fleet could come in and destroy the Death Star, right? That's kind of what happened. So I kind of show you that and wanted to use it as a parallel that what we did there, your tactical skills, your small ability, right? Protecting this local environment, right? Outsourcing to other companies for higher end active monitoring, especially if you have really expensive data where they can really affect you. It's all kind of the same. And like we built the play-to-play, as you can see, the units could not succeed if they didn't have some cyber skills and at least develop some cyber people in their unit that could communicate with the outside units. They would fail, right? So the companies, or the challenge that you're going to face when you're in that company, is you've got to find a way to communicate to all those guys shooting the missiles or doing the things or delivering the goods or whatever your company does. Communicate the value of cyber, how you need it for defense, because someone can do that to you, and then how you can leverage it to enhance your operations, which is exactly what we did. So someday that's going to be your challenge, whether it's in the civilian world or whether it's the military or whether it's in the FBI. Their stuff is probably similar, but writ large, it's all kind of the same, and that's going to be your challenge. How do you get the buy-in? How do you show them the value? How do you show them the risk? Right? That's going to be your biggest challenge. So understand their perspectives, and then you got to find a way to build it, pay to play, so they adopt. And that's all I've got for you guys today. Any questions? Okay. Thanks so much for you guys' time. Have a great day.